I am Alyssa Miller, and I am absolutely astounded. This has been the most wonderful experience being here with all of you here in New Zealand, in Christchurch. If you couldn't tell from the accent, yes, I'm American. Please forgive me for that, and forgive us for what we've done over there. But let's dive in. But enough of that. How many of you are this child? How many of you were that kid? You know what I'm talking about, right? We took our toys apart because why? We wanted to figure out how they worked, right? We were curious. I was no different. That was me back when I was 4 years old, taking things apart. This, to me, is the essence of what it means to be a hacker. Hackers aren't criminals. We're not horrible people. Well, sometimes we can be. And, each their own. But it's this unquenchable curiosity that really is what drives the hacker ethos. So 4 years old onward, I remember those days. And I just, toys, sometimes my parents' electronics. First time I took the VCR apart, they weren't real thrilled with me. You know what I'm talking about, right? So that's where I see my hacker roots come from. And then it progressed. I was very fortunate that early on, when I was 4 years old, my father brought home from work a computer. He was an accountant that had to close the books for the year, and rather than sit in an office all by himself, he brought his computer home. I kind of feel like he pioneered working from home. But in the downtime, he let me play games on it, and that got me rolling. That really lit the spark. And so then in elementary school, I was fortunate enough that we had computers. First, we had these TRS-80s. They were a Radio Shack computer. Some of you might have played with if you're old enough to remember them. And the problem was when they bought them, they didn't buy any disks. No disk drives, no permanent storage, nothing. So they were really good for two things: typing practice, or when you turned them on, because there was no operating system, you could do basic programming. So I started learning basic programming. Then we got an Apple lab, and it got better. But at 12 years old, I went out and I got a job. In the States, I'm not sure how much this translates, but we had paper routes. So literally, we thought it was a great idea to send 12-year-old kids out into the neighborhood in the dark, early mornings, to deliver newspapers to people's front doorsteps. I did that for a while. I saved up quite a bit of money, went to Radio Shack, and I bought that computer at 12 years old in 1989. So now you can do the math, you figure out how old I am. That was unusual for a kid my age, but that was where my spark was. So I love that. I had that drive. I wanted to learn. I continued teaching myself more programming. I got into C programming then as well. Keep in mind, this is pre-internet days. Anyone out there recognize this login screen? I don't see a single hand.
In the back.
Oh, there is. Okay, excellent. We got at least one. So, because we didn't have the internet, we had these dial-up services, and one of them was called Prodigy. And all it was it was kind of like a BBS a little bit, in that you dialed up to this graphical interface. You dialed into their servers, and they had email and games and other things. The catch was what they would do when you bought a new computer is they would give you a disk. And it said, hey, here, install this software, and you can use it free for 20 hours. Great. I'm 12 years old, fired up, get the modem connected, piss off my parents because they couldn't use the phone while I was dialed up. Hey, sorry, I'm learning here. But, after 20 hours, I played all the games, and I wanted to keep going. But I'm 12 years old. I don't exactly have a credit card to use. So I did what probably very few 12-year-olds would do. I started going to the library. I checked out books on UART, on assembly, and I dug into their software. Long story short, I figured out how to log in without actually having a valid user account. Or at least, to be more clear, a user account that was paying for a subscription. So that was kind of where I really feel like computer hacking started for me. And then the internet came along, which was great, because as a teenager and adolescent, I didn't have a lot of friends who understood what I was into. But we did have IRC, and that's when I found my people. That's when I found the hacker communities out there in Undernet, and we'd slap each other with a trout, if you know what I'm talking about. If you know, you know. And that got me through my teenage years, and it gave me this sense of pride in the hacker community, right? So I went off to university. At that time, cybersecurity really wasn't a career path. Computers didn't even really stand out as a career path. I started in pre-med. I was going to be a doctor, but I'll tell you what, 3 semesters of chemistry at university will tell you right away if you don't want to be a doctor. I did not want to be a doctor. Chemistry ruined it for me. So I had to scramble. I found a new major. I actually changed schools. I ultimately ended up in a computer degree. And if you were here yesterday, Leslie mentioned this as well. It struck a chord when they said it. This was the dot-com boom. I was 19 years old in university, and I went out and I got my first job. So what you see here is kind of the graphical representation of my LinkedIn page. This is my career path. It started at a company called M&I Data Services. And I got that first job, like I said, while I was still in university. I was doing software development for them in their electronic payment services platform. So this is something we take for granted nowadays. Like you can use things like Zelle, Venmo, PayPal, you name it, whatever. You go through your bank. Back in the day, you used to have to do that through your bank's website, and we provided that software. Later on, the M&I Data Services was actually part of a bank called M&I Bank. They spun us off. We became a company called Metavante, and it was right around that time that my cybersecurity career started, because a manager from our information security team came to me and said, "How'd you like to join our security test team? It's pen tested." And I don't know what pen testing is. What do you mean? How am I going to do that? She said, "You're smart, you'll figure it out. That's why I asked you." So, little serendipitous event, little happy accident. I said, "What the heck, I'll do it." Then a few years later, we merged with a larger company called FIS. Some of you may know them. They're still around today. And at that point, that was when I made my first step into leadership, because I was asked to take on a manager role for that security test team. I worked with that team for another few years. I ended up 15 years at that same company. Said, "I've seen enough financial services. I want to see something else." I went to Fishnet Security. At Fishnet, I was given the opportunity for the first time to build a team. I was in the leadership role. I was asked to build out a practice, an application security practice. And again, I really had never done that before. I mean, I had a team. I managed a team. I'd never built one before. I was nervous. I was scared. I was like, what the heck? They're offering me a great job. So I did it. Built a wonderful team of consultants. We did pen testing against applications. We did secure code training, you name it. But then they merged with another company. They became this big, larger company that will remain nameless. So I went to a new company. I decided I didn't want that culture. I wanted to go somewhere else. I joined Aspect Security. Now, Aspect Security, I was running an entire application security practice, but it wasn't pen testing. It was application security programs. How do we help organizations secure their stuff? So this was the first time that I found myself in a board game, because I was working with CISOs, I was working with CIOs, CTOs, and a lot of our reports need to be presented to their boards, and they would bring us in to do that. I walked into that first board meeting, I had no idea, right? I never been at a board meeting in my life. I read up all sorts of stuff. I talked to the CEO of our company who was going to be in the meeting with me, and we got an idea, and we went in there and we just did it. And it worked out. Did I make mistakes? You bet. I had a CISO at one of these early on who, unfortunately, after I presented my report, he got blasted by his board, and then, of course, he wasn't really happy with me. Things happen. They merged. They went to a big company here with 2 letters in their name that are down the road. Won't talk about who that is either. So I again left, went to a new company, CDW. Now I was running this entire security consulting practice at a reseller. They sell printers and things, right? But they also did security. But this was my first time having to work in an environment where I was part of a big sales organization, right? They're a reseller. They resell software and stuff. And so, again, walking into a world I just didn't really understand, and I learned, and I grew, and I went. I took a chance. I knew I didn't know what I was doing going in, but I knew enough. I knew the consulting space. I've been doing that for years now. And I used that to drive me forward. And then, just before the pandemic hit, this company some of you might have heard of, Sneak, came to me. And it's Sneak. I know the British people will tell you it's Snick. It's not. It's Sneak. There's a whole story there. But Sneak was my first time actually working for a product vendor. They asked me to come in, and we want you just to help us. We want you to be our cybersecurity advocate. You all have probably heard of developer advocates. They wanted a security advocate. They wanted me to connect with the CISO personas, the high-level leadership personas in the security space, because up until then, they had been really focused on developers. But they wanted someone over here to say, all right, I need you to help us talk to the security folks. Again, a new world for me. I didn't have marketing experience. I didn't know this stuff. I'd never been a developer advocate or anything, but I took it on. Unfortunately, the job didn't pan out. I was supposed to be doing all sorts of traveling, speaking at wonderful events like this to amazing folks like you, but the pandemic hit. So about a year later, I got an offer, or I got a call, actually, from a friend of mine, said, hey, I'm over here at S&P Global. I'm the CISO. One of our divisions is hiring a business information security officer. Would you take a look at that? And I didn't really know what that was. Well, it turns out it is basically leading cybersecurity for a $4 billion division of this massive company in the United States. And it was at that point I started to realize this is my last step before I hit the goal. The thing that I've been chasing for a long time. I've been trying to jump up that ladder because I wanted to be a CISO. 2.5 years ago, it happened. I joined a company called Epic Global. I became the CISO. I went from this little kid, 4 years old, who just wanted to take things apart and figure out how they work, to now I'm leading cybersecurity for a global $4 billion organization. How the heck did that happen? It was a series of just happy accidents, unfortunately, because, and I say unfortunately only because it doesn't give me a lot that I can impart when I'm mentoring people. But what I can impart to all of you is this. There were a lot of lessons learned. And I want to share those with you today. So let's dive right in. How many of you recognize this person? Any of you? A few, I think I see a few hands. That's Mudge. Does that name ring a bell? Loft? Yeah. How about this person? You recognize that person? That's also Mudge. That's Mudge about 4 years ago when he was working in security at Twitter. Yes, it's still called Twitter. Don't argue with me on that. That's non-negotiable. This X thing, what the hell? But one of the things I learned really early on is I assumed that as I was trying to climb that corporate ladder, eventually I was going to have to let go of that hacker side and go to that corporate-y, wear a suit every day, behave in a very different style, not have piercings, blah, 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 kind of like when Mudge did. But what I learned was I couldn't have been more wrong. That's why you see me standing up here today in a biker jacket and, spiked heels with spikes all over them, right? Leather pants. This is me. This is who I am. And what it is I learned that authenticity is what's going to drive your success. Now, a friend of mine, a colleague, his name is Phil Gerbishek. He's actually from the same state I am in the United States, oddly enough. Wrote a book, and he talks about what's your weird. It's a personal branding book. But he talks about find that thing. What is it about you that's unique or different or doesn't fit in with the rest of the space that you run in that makes you stand out, and grab a hold of it and use that. Let that drive you forward. And that's what I did. In my career, at the point that I realized, oh, you know what? I don't have to hide the fact that I was a childhood hacker. I don't have to hide the fact that I did things that if I did them today would probably have put me in jail. If I talk about that, These executives and board, they think that's like the coolest damn thing. They're like, oh my God, you hired a hacker to be our CISO? They think it's great. And when I embraced that, my career took off. I don't know if you caught that in that series, but each of those got shorter and shorter because suddenly I kept stepping up the ladder. I hate that term, but you get what I mean. As I kept moving, it happened faster and faster and faster, and before I knew it, I landed at that goal that I had set for myself. So my encouragement to you is find that thing. It might just be that you're a hacker. It might be that there's something unique about you. The culture where you come from, the path you took to get here. It could be anything. It could be a hobby that you're into. But use that and let that drive who you are. Embrace who it is that you feel you are inside, because believe me, when you can live authentically like that and you don't have that noise in the back of your head telling me, I gotta act like this, I gotta do this, I gotta dress like this, look like this, behave like this, you take all that noise away and just be you, you will excel in your role. Second lesson, where are my SQL folks out here? Take a look at that query. What's that gonna do? Mistakes will happen. This was me, way back when I was at that financial services company. I told you I worked in our payments division. This was me doing some development for upcoming migration. This was the last step, which was to test the queries in production. Now, I clearly oversimplified it just so you guys can actually read it. But this is essentially the mistake I made. I was supposed to be running the select statement, but somehow managed to not only forget to switch the commented line between select and delete, but also forgot to uncomment the where clause. And it did that. And I looked like that. 2.5 million rows gone. Okay? And this is the naive early 2000s. We didn't have the kind of like real-time replication with databases that we have today. It's really cool. It makes our jobs a whole lot easier. No. We had an incremental backup from midnight the night before, which we were able to recover to, surprisingly. But then it was replaying 8 hours of application logs back through the API of the app to recover all of the changes and additions and deletions of payments that were done by users over the course of the day. The thing with this story, if you talk to people who've been in IT for any length of time, everybody's got a story. Maybe not quite this catastrophic. I mean, we heard a story yesterday from Justina. She was up here talking about, having dumped LSAS on the wrong box. Whoops. And kicking off an incident response. Yeah, those things happen. But the key there, the lesson to learn from them is just like a hacker would. Just like as hackers, we set out, we finally make mistakes, we get errors, and we use them to refine our exploits. You need to do the same with your career. As you make those mistakes, embrace them, understand them. Understand that each mistake you make is a clue. It's a piece of the puzzle that's going to lead you to the next step. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. That is how we keep progressing. So don't let those mistakes be the thing that drive you down and make you feel like you're not worthy. I'm not telling you to go out and seek to delete 2.5 million rows from a database. That's not good. It's very bad. You should try to avoid them. But they're going to happen. And when they do, it's not about the mistake you made, it's about how you handle it. I could have sat there and tried to hide that thing, tried to figure out a way out of it. How did I delete 2.5 million rows? Oh my God, trying to sort out a way with no one finding out. That would have been nearly impossible. But no, I right away went to the right people. No one yelled, no one screamed. There were some heavy sighs. There was definitely some questions. How did this happen? Let's talk about that later. Let's fix it for now. And we did talk about it, and it led to positive change even in our processes. So just as a hacker would, when you run into those moments, Use that. Figure out how are you going to grow from that moment. How is that moment going to make you better? How's it going to make your exploits stronger? How is it going to propel you forward? All right, our third lesson. I mentioned boards. Presenting to the boards is something that is part and parcel to being in cybersecurity leadership. Thankfully, it's becoming more and more common. It's something we fought for years for as CISOs. I can remember 20 years ago, the conversation was, the boards don't want to hear from CISOs. The reality is they still don't like to hear from us. Now, I've seen various reasons why. Some of it is because there are plenty of CISOs out there who still love to lead with FUD. We just love to go in and scare people. I don't know why that is. We just like to make people really scared. But the problem is when you go in and scare people, they become afraid of you. Yeah, they know this ethereal story you're telling you about all these risks and threats and all the bad things that could happen in our company, but they get afraid of you and they don't want to hear from you anymore. And they stop talking to you. But the reality is, especially now, as more and more boards are starting to understand their responsibility for overseeing cybersecurity, they're just as afraid to talk to us because they don't understand it. They don't know what to ask. They don't know what they should be looking for. They don't know how to deal with us. You put a CFO in front of them, a chief financial officer, they get that, right? They know how to ask about, how are the finances looking? What was our EBITDA for the last quarter? Things like that. You put an HR person in front of them, they kind of understand it. They know how to ask, okay, how's our retention? Are we having problems recruiting? How are we doing on benefits? They get that. You put a CISO in front of them, they don't know. And so, how do we get around that? Well, let's take another hacker lesson. It's about reconnaissance. If you're walking into a board meeting, if you're walking into a meeting with your executive team, anybody who's outside cybersecurity, the best place to start is with reconnaissance. You wouldn't go in and try to pen test an application, or at least I hope you wouldn't, without first sitting down and trying to find out the details of what that application was, maybe looking for some OSID on various aspects of, maybe you go searching social media to try to figure out what programming language it's written in because someone shared a bunch of stuff on Stack Overflow or something. Same thing when you're going to meet with people who you have to explain cybersecurity to. Know where they come from. Understand what their perspectives are. If you've got somebody who built a big tech company and that's why they're on the board, you might speak to them a little differently than someone who came in who was, controller for a bank. Because obviously their world is different. So understand who you're talking to and think for a minute about what's going to motivate them. Because at the end of the day, your job, whether you're a cybersecurity executive, whether you're an engineer delivering a report, your job is to influence the decisions of others. You could be a SOC engineer. Your job is still to influence others' actions. We have this event. This thing is happening. I might be able to take certain steps now, but hey, I need you, HR, to isolate this person. Or I need, you development team to fix this glaring hole in your application. All of that takes understanding who it is that you're talking to and how you can influence them based on their motivations, not just assume they're dumb and they don't care. Speaking of dumb, another lesson I've learned, board members are not dumb, but holy shit do they ask dumb questions. I'm telling you, they do, but why? Why do they ask dumb questions? Well, I just told you why. Because they know they have to do something, but they don't know what. So they'll ask really bizarre questions. Again, being from the States, I was in a board meeting when I was at S&P Global, actually. I probably shouldn't say this, but I'll tell you who it was. And one of the board members asked me, so are we working with DARPA on this? Okay, DARPA is defense contracting, okay? Oh, then we don't do any defense. We're working with, international organizations like CISA and others, CISA from the US government, et cetera. But DARPA, but clearly she had heard it somewhere. Maybe she was on the board for another organization that was a defense contractor or worked with DARPA and she'd seen some neat things. I don't know. But the fact of the matter was, she knew she needed to ask something. She wanted to provide something of value. Their job as board is to provide guidance and oversight. So, from my aspect, it was like, man, that's a really bizarre question. I had to think about how to deal with that. No, that's an extreme example, but there are others out there. Here's a few of them, and I'm going to try to read these to you because they're really small. I don't normally do bullets on slides, so forgive me for this. But, one of the key questions they'll ask, are we secure? Well, again, taking a page out of my hacker playbook, let's evade that question a little bit and steer it where we want it to be. I'm not avoiding asking the question, but I want to reframe it, right? Because are we secure? Who the hell is ever going to stand up and say, yes, we're secure, 100%? I'll tell you, if you find the CISO who's going to say that, fire them. Right? I mean, seriously, that's not anything anyone's ever going to ask yes to. But what are they looking for? If you think about their motivations, well, they're trying to understand just, are we being successful? Are there things I have to worry about as a board member, things that we should be digging into deeper? So how do you reframe that question? Well, you can speak to it in terms of continuous improvement. Wouldn't that we're going to be all secure every year? No. But we are continuing to work at getting better and better. We want to always be more secure today than we were yesterday. That's my goal as a CISO. How do I get those little incremental improvements? The other CI I joke about sometimes, really lame jokes, by the way. But, continuous improvement. Yeah, that's what we're there for. Another one I love, this one you get all the time. I have not been at a board meeting yet, I have not been with a board from a company yet who did not ask this question at least once. Can you show us how many attacks you blocked last month? Well, let's see. We blocked 2 trains, 745,632. What? One, if I know that number, I'm lying. Because how do you even classify that? 2, what relevance does that number even have? We were talking yesterday about, I forget his name who was up here, but who was talking about looking at an alert from a port scan, right? Like, how many of those do you get in a day? Is that an attack? Maybe not. But I can certainly lump that into that big old number I'm going to tell you. It doesn't mean anything. But what are they trying to understand? What they're trying to know is, hey, are we being successful? Is our cybersecurity program we're spending all this money on, is it actually doing something for us? Is it making us more secure? So this is where you can steer the conversation into talking about trends. Maybe you sit down and you do the kind of table stakes one, and you just take, here's how many vulnerabilities we had last month, and here's the 3-month trend. You can see it's trending lower, lower, and lower. We're closing active vulnerabilities in our environment. Maybe you get more advanced and you can talk about different initiatives. You can talk about the KPIs that you put in place, things that were going to be your indicator of performance, your indicator of getting better, and say, yes, we've hit these marks. Or no, we didn't hit these marks because this business unit over here has some technical debt that's proven problematic. And then they become your allies to help you make progress with them. Comparisons to competitors, that's another one that happens a lot. They always want to know, how are we doing compared to our competitors? Are our competitors spending as much as we are? That's really what they want to know. They want to know, are we spending our money in the right place? So here you could I've been able to steer this one. When you get that question, it's like, well, let's talk about our maturity. Let's not worry about what our competitors are doing. They have different environments, they're different sizes, they're different shapes, they're different colors. In my company right now, we love BitSite. We hate BitSite. We love BitSite. We hate BitSite. It's a fun number to look at. If you're familiar with BitSight, they give you security ratings. It's like a credit score, 300 to 820. And I've got people in my company who like to watch our competitors versus us. And sure, that's kind of nice. It keeps the executives engaged. But at the end of the day, I don't really care what these other competitors look like. What I care about is us. How are we progressing? How does that attack surface that BitSight's looking at, how is that actually progressing? Are we shrinking that down? Are we eliminating the vulnerabilities from that? Let's not put too much stock in that score either, because that score is a very outside view, and they tend to focus on a lot of things that, yes, we could fix them to raise the score, but they really don't mean much for cybersecurity preparedness. Oh, we have an expired cert on a machine that's being decommed, and they saw it before we finished decomming the server, so they knock our score down 10 points. Do I want to go chasing that to try to get those 10 points back? No. I mean, that's going to be hours of my team working on crap that doesn't really make us any more secure. And then this is my favorite. I swear to God, I got this question verbatim. So when are we done investing in cybersecurity? I swear to God, I looked this gentleman dead in the face and said, I'm not trying to be a smartass, but when you decide you want to stop growing your business. Because to grow your business, you're using new technologies, you're expanding into new markets, and every time you do that, I've got new challenges from cybersecurity side. So the key here is to highlight how does security become our competitive advantage, right? Because they're looking at, well, we're spending a lot of money on cybersecurity, that's money we can't spend to grow our business elsewhere. But the reality is, and then you might think I'm nuts saying this, you can actually demonstrate how cybersecurity drives innovation in your company. You can show them how cybersecurity can create a new revenue stream for your organization. Talk to me after if you want examples of that. I can give you definitive, very concrete examples of how I've actually shown cybersecurity to create a new revenue stream, how I showed it to create new market offerings, all by using cybersecurity technology. So use those evasion techniques. Understand, this one is so important. It's why I spent so much time on this particular topic. But let's move on now. I kind of touched on this already. Your job in cybersecurity, from the day you get your first entry-level role to the day that you are at the executive meeting, you're at the board level now, whatever it is that you're doing, your job always, number one, is to be educating others. We're hired for our expertise. One of the things I really get frustrated with is I'll hear statements like, well, as cybersecurity professionals, we're really just risk management professionals. Had CISO say that once in a panel I was on. Said, my job is, I'm a risk management professional. Well, you know what? Everybody has that C title in front of their name, or at the end of their name. Their job is risk management too. So if that's the only thing as a cybersecurity professional you can hang your hat on, you're pretty damn boring and you're not worth much. CFO is there to manage financial risk, but human resources, CHRO is there to manage human capital risk. Yeah. The CIO is there to manage your technology risk, etc. All these come into play. We are there to manage cyber security risk. But that's just part and parcel of the job. The reality is we are there to educate the rest of the organization on what is going on in our space. The same way the CFO is there to educate them on, hey, here's how we're looking from a revenue perspective, here's how our budgets are playing out, here's why this market shift with higher interest rates over here is problematic for us, etc. That's our job as cybersecurity professionals. So, just like as a pen tester, your reports need to be quality. If you're giving a presentation to your executives, you gotta come with quality. Come with metrics that matter. Your metrics, anytime you put a bunch of graphs and stuff like this on a slide, on a presentation, in a report, ask yourself one simple question. What's the story I'm telling with this slide? And this can go two ways. One, you may look at your pretty cool graph that you just created, and it says, you say, wow, that's showing an odd increase that I can't explain. I'm going to dig into that further, and we're going to figure out what the story is behind that. So you let the metrics drive the story. Sometimes, and this is going to sound sneaky, maybe a little slimy, but it's the reality of how you educate others. Sometimes you may be looking to tell a specific story. Maybe you've just completed implementation of some new initiative. Let's say you rolled out a new, we'll say, privileged access management tool just for grades. And you're having trouble expressing that in a credible, tangible way. Maybe you go looking and report on the metrics that actually demonstrate the successes that that's causing in the organization. Did it reduce help desk time? Did it reduce change management failures? Whatever. But anything you put in a metrics deck, in a metrics presentation, in a report, should be telling some sort of story. If it's not, there's no point to having it in there. Reporting on the number of vulnerabilities currently open in your organization, just as a raw number, doesn't tell me anything. If I tell you a trend, we see this trending up or down, we see that the vast majority of the ones that are open are old findings, well, now that tells me something, right? That says, hey, the IT folks aren't patching as fast as they should be. That's what you're looking for. Come with that quality. Anyone who tells you the CISOs have the toughest job in the world, and that is an actual headline, I have two words for you, and pardon the profanity once again, but I think I'm in the safe crowd here. Bullshit! Every C-level job is hard. Every C-level job is incredibly stressful. Every C-level job requires working stupid hours, all hours of the day or night. I can tell you I've had to call my CFO at 2 in the morning. Now, probably less often. I think CFO, human resources, what I keep talking about, they maybe get less of it. But the fact of the matter is we are not the special snowflakes of our organizations. We deal in a unique space. But then again, so does the CTO. So does the CIO. We all have our unique niche that we're dealing with, and we all have those things that keep us up at night. My CIO, I can tell you right now, he's not staying up at night about security. That's my job, to be, stressing at all hours about, are we going to get breached? He's stressing about that old shitty technology that we're trying to still support 20 years after it went out of support, and we're trying to keep it running because, by the way, it has to be up 24/7. And we all have that stress. So the reason I say this and the reason I call this out is it's important to understand that, yes, it's a hard job. Cybersecurity as a whole is a hard job. If it was easy, we wouldn't get paid to do it. That's why they pay us. That's the point. That's why we train. It's why we have conferences like this. But understand, every job has its complexities. I will tell you right now, I could not do the job that those baristas are doing over there in that coffee shop. I would be awful at that. They have a skill. So stop focusing on how hard the job is, and instead, just like as a pen tester, we need to see the bigger picture. Like I've mentored and trained pen testers who so often get mired and they run down a rabbit hole of one vulnerability that they think they found. Oh, I got this error on the login page when I put a single tick in. There's got to be SQL injection here somewhere. And they don't look at the bigger picture. They don't understand what the app is actually doing, why that error generated the way it did, right? We need to do the same thing when we look at our jobs. Our jobs, especially when you get to that CISO level, it's not just about cybersecurity anymore. Leslie talked about it yesterday. You actually kind of start to, the higher up into leadership levels you go, the more you kind of divorce yourself from the day-to-day, right? I tell my team right now, don't you dare give me any write access in my Azure environment at all. I'm a global reader. That's all I need. That's all I ever want. If you give me anything else, you're fired. Like, because if you give me anything more than that, I'm gonna break shit. And if I break shit, that's bad. So no, that's the reality of this, right? Like, we have to understand as we get higher up, and I use higher up, I don't really like that, but it's the imagery we use in business, right? And as you move into those leadership layers, your job becomes so much more about understanding the bigger picture of how cybersecurity is engaging and supporting the business, and less about just, well, I got to make us secure so we don't get breached. Yeah, that's part of the job, of course. But how does that matter to the organization? And it's not just, well, if we get breached, we'll be out of business. How many companies have we seen get breached that aren't out of business? A lot more than that have gone out of business. So understand that you're there to be a part of the overall business success. Now, that book that I have up here, the 10-day MBA, by the way, countless people have asked me over time, messages on, in-person conversations, whatever, what's one thing you would recommend I do if I want to be a CISO? Buy that book and read it. Don't go out and get an MBA, unless you already have one. Great, cool, awesome, then maybe that book's not for you. But that book is awesome because it teaches you the language and the concepts that all the other executives are thinking about, that your board members more often than not are going to be thinking about. It's a great book. And no, I don't get any commissions for mentioning it. I don't even know Steven Silliger. I just know it's a great book that I really enjoyed. It helped me a ton. So I do recommend it to others. Here's another one. This is where the soapbox really gets going. InfoSec advice is based in nuance, okay? What do I mean by that? How many of you heard this phrase, never let a good crisis go to waste? Right? And what do we mean when we say that? How do we usually interpret that? It's usually run out and buy all the things. Get all the stuff you can, right? All those things that they wouldn't buy for you, now they're willing to buy for you because we just had a breach. Go buy all that stuff. Well, that's great, but what happens when you buy all that stuff and now 2 years later, you haven't been able to get it all rolled out yet, or it isn't working together, or you're having other failures because you just went on a spending spree and bought a bunch of crap, right? You went out, you went and looked at the Gartner Magic Quadrant. We bought all of these solutions that were in the upper right because that's the best. They're the best. We need the best because we got breached. We got to get the best stuff. Is that really what's important? I will tell you this, even if you've not been breached. Your job is to establish persistence in their minds. The tail of that effect after a breach, and there's studies on this. I wish I had one to quote for you, I don't. But I've read them. Generally, they say it's about 18 months. So you have a breach, you're going to get about 18 months of impact from that where people are very interested in hearing about it. After that, it becomes white noise, they forget about it. We live, as you all know, in a society that's driven by very short news cycles. That impacts us everywhere, and it includes the attention you get after a breach. So how do you establish persistence in their minds? You need to look at your maturity. You need to give them a picture. Here's where we are today. Hey, we just got breached 2 weeks ago. This is where we sit. Maybe 2 months ago, because it probably took a little while to get out of that incident. This is where we are right now. This is where I want to be. And track to that. Now you've given them something interesting to pay attention to. You've given them something that says, this isn't going to be fixed in 18 months. This is going to be something we're going to have to step towards over time. All right, my favorite one of all, dumb CISO tricks. CISOs also say really dumb things. I've said a lot of them up here probably. CISOs say dumb things. This is my favorite example though, and again, I'll read it to you because it's small. In an actual board meeting that I sat in as a consultant, the CISO said, well, at the end of the day, it's not if companies are going to get hacked, but when. How many have heard or maybe even said some version of that? Yes, You can admit it, I have too. But then, here's the coup de grace. He follows it up with, a few moments later, he says this: our biggest risk is that my budget isn't enough to protect us sufficiently from attackers. Think about this. I just told you there is absolutely nothing I can do. It's an eventuality. We're going to get breached. But hey, give me more money so I can keep us from getting breached. You just said it's impossible. And then we wonder why they'd rather go spend money on cyber insurance than on our initiatives. Cyber insurance? Hey, at least then I know, in theory, I'm getting paid if we get breached. You're telling me I'm going to spend all this money and not get anything for it. So understand those things that you say, they have impact. Yes, we as security practitioners, we get the concept. Yes, it's not if, but when. But we need to be smarter. So instead, I am a huge fan, and this ties back in with the last one, put together your roadmap. Show them how you're going to get from A to B. Give them that process. Let them see it. See how it's going to grow. See how one initiative feeds to the next, to the goal. And then you move on to the next. But by giving them that roadmap, pivoting to that next target as we would if this were a pen test, we have that one success, we let that drive to the next, and we let that drive to the next to our goal of getting, where I'm in, right? That's what we need to do in these conversations. Don't go up there and tell them, I can't stop you from being breached, now give me money. It's not going to work. And now, hearkening back again to Leslie's keynote yesterday, leadership doesn't come from technical experience. There's tons of people out there with technical experience, but leadership is something different. And you have to recognize that. And leadership is a skill in and of itself. Because at the end of the day, your job as a leader, just like as it is as a pen tester, is to find a bunch of diverse tools and bring them together and use them in a powerful way that creates results. By the way, that is what DEI is all about. That is what diversity and inclusion is about. Your job is to find those different people. I had a conversation with a recruiter out at lunch yesterday, and I shared with him, what I'm hiring, one of the things I look for the most when I speak to someone in an interview is, hey, I'm looking for that person who's going to make me think about something differently. So I don't like these big, long lists of required or desirable requirements in my job descriptions, because if I do that, that's me thinking about what I want the person to look like. I talk about what I'm going to expect them to do. And then I want them to come to that interview and tell me how they would look at it, how they would solve those problems, how they would tackle it, because if they think about it different than me, that's perfect. That's my job as a CISO, is to bring all those very disparate tools, or in this case, people, together and drive a cohesive team, figure out how to coordinate them and make them work together, right? Inspire them to be the best that they can be. Give me for saying that. US folks, you know what I just said. God, oh God, I'm gonna cry. Yeah, I apologize, CISO say stupid things. All right. The last and maybe most important lesson, and it seems maybe obvious to some of you, but to some of you this might be a revelation. To be successful in your cybersecurity career, you don't have to be in leadership at all. You have seen amazing talent at all different levels of their career appear already in the first day and now going into the second. There are amazingly successful people all throughout this audience here. Some of you may be in leadership roles. Some of you may be in technical roles. I have amazing architects and engineers on my team who have zero desire to get into leadership roles or management roles, we'll call them, because you know what? When you're that good at what you do, you become a leader by example. But management may not be for you, and that's okay. Understand that. Explore it. It might be something you enjoy. But again, to reiterate something that's been said a couple times yesterday, understand that it's not for everyone. And it is a very different skill set than what makes you successful as a technical person. So it's just about time for me to wrap up. I want to do a couple things here. First of all, I want to leave you with this quote from Barack Obama. It's one of my favorites. It harkens back to what I was talking about earlier with everybody's going to make those mistakes. You're going to make them, I'm going to make them, I make them every day, you make them every day. It's how we learn and grow from them. Do we let them scare us into doing nothing more, or do we drive forward from them? All right, so before I walk out of here, I want to leave you with this. I always encourage you, please continue the conversation. I've shared a lot of things with you. I hope some of it's been valuable, but find me on social media. Reach out. I put my YouTube up there only because I've got a series on, I didn't mention this before, but I wrote a book, Cybersecurity Career Guide, to try to help people find their way into a career. But I've got a number of free resources on that YouTube channel. I did a 28-day Get Hired challenge based on the book. So some of the things that are in the book are there available for you for free. Be sure to check those out. If they're helpful for you, great. But like I said, reach out. Lorera, Tenekotu, 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 Kotu. Kotu some.
I am a super genius.